I was nobody. A ghost behind a desk, invisible to the most dangerous man in Chicago. For 2 years, I kept my head down, filed his reports, and pretended I didn't notice the armed men on the executive floor. I told myself I was just a secretary. He told himself I was just an employee. We were both lying. Because the night a rival dared to call me beautiful in front of him, Theo Valentini slammed his fist on the table, ended a deal worth millions, and said 5 words that changed everything. She is mine. Get out. What I didn't know was that claiming me would start a war, that my ex-boyfriend was watching from the shadows, that a bullet would come through our bedroom window, and that the man everyone called a monster would become the only person willing to die to keep me alive. This is a story about what happens when you stop being invisible and start choosing yourself, even when that choice pulls you into a world you were never meant to survive. If you've ever felt unseen, underestimated, or trapped in a life too small for who you really are, stay until the very end. This one will stay with you. The hum of the lights matched the ache in my skull. I had worked here for 2 years. 2 years of 12-hour days, mastering how to disappear in front of Chicago's most dangerous man. The clock read 9:47 p.m. Another night sacrificed to Valentini Industries. The voice from the doorway was sharp. It was Marco, Theo's right-hand man. Mr. Valentini needs the quarterly reports on his desk by morning. All of them. I swallowed my exhaustion. Of course. His expensive shoes clicked away, leaving me alone with an impossible task. This is what it means to be powerless. 17 reports. Each one required at least an hour. The math was simple and cruel. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother's nurse in Ohio. She was asking about me. Guilt was a familiar knife in my chest. I needed this overtime to pay for her care. It was a vicious, endless cycle. I reached for an emergency energy drink. In the dark window, my reflection was a stranger. She was 26 but looked 40. But the salary was triple what I could make anywhere else, so I learned not to ask questions. I knew what Theo Valentini was. The newspapers called him a businessman. The streets had other names for him. I focused on the first report, completing it in 43 minutes. My fingers moved with practiced speed, pulling the data he would demand. I had learned his preferences through sharp corrections and rare grunts of approval. At 11:15 p.m., the elevator chimed. My heart leaped into my throat. Theo was here. His footsteps grew closer. I stared at my screen, willing myself to be invisible. He would walk past my desk. He always did. Except tonight, the footsteps stopped. I looked up, my breath caught tight in my chest. Theo Valentini stood only a few feet away. His dark suit was perfect. His tie was slightly loose. He was 34 years old and carried himself like a king. His storm gray eyes swept over me, and I felt as though he could see every secret I owned. You are still here. His voice was a low rumble, with a hint of Italian that only emerged when he was tired or angry. I tried to sound professional, not breathless. Marco said you needed the reports. He glanced at the empty energy drink can, then his gaze returned to my face. All 17? He asked. Yes, sir. He was quiet for a long moment. How long have you worked for me, Miss Morgan? 2 years next month. And in that time, have I ever asked you to do the impossible? I hesitated. Difficult things, but never impossible. 17 reports in 7 hours, he said, checking his watch. That is impossible. I want my employees functional, not martyred. Complete what you can tonight, he said. The rest can wait for tomorrow. It was the longest conversation we had ever had. It was also the kindest thing he had ever said to me. I was not sure how to respond. Thank you, sir. He nodded and turned toward his office. I released a breath I did not know I was holding. I could still feel his gaze on me. Miss Morgan. I looked up. He stood in his doorway. Go home at midnight. That is not a suggestion. The door clicked shut, louder than a slam. I finished 6 reports by midnight. His light was still burning when I left. The next morning, a hot coffee from my favorite shop was on my desk. There was no note. I knew who sent it. I tried not to read into the gesture. The day passed in a blur of calls and emails. I managed his schedule. There were normal meetings with contractors. Then came the other meetings. Men who used the private elevator, men who never signed in. They always left with grim expressions. At 2 o'clock, Marco appeared at my desk. Mr. Valentini wants you in the conference room. My stomach dropped. The conference room was for important meetings, not for secretaries. I grabbed my tablet, my mind racing. I had never been summoned there before. The room overlooked the city. Theo sat at the head of a long table with 3 other men. I recognized 2 of them. The third was a stranger, young and polished. When I entered, his eyes lit with an interest that made my skin crawl. Model Vincent Caruso smirked at my boss. He said you never told him your secretary was so beautiful. I retreated into my professional shell, a place I went when men looked at me like an object. I moved to the quiet corner of the room to take notes. Theo's voice was flat. Miss Morgan handles my schedule. Caruso's smile grew. A waste of talent for simple scheduling. A chill entered the room. Theo's eyes turned hard. My secretary's duties are not your business, Caruso. That name was familiar. He was the son of a rival. Caruso raised his hands in a fake apology. He then asked if I was single, offering himself as a candidate. Theo's hand slammed the table. The sound was like a gunshot. I froze. The meeting is over. Each word from Theo was a frozen blade. He told his men to escort Caruso out now. The associates moved without a word, guiding the confused man from the room. The door clicked shut. I was left alone with Theo in a heavy, dangerous silence. I could not move. Theo stood and walked toward me. Each step was slow and deliberate. He stopped right in front of me, so close I could smell the smoke and cedar of his cologne. His voice was a low growl. For 2 years, I have watched you. For 2 years, I have heard your voice. For 2 years, I have pretended not to notice you. My breathing stopped. Theo Valentini did not see his secretary. He barely knew I existed. I do not understand, I whispered. He backed me against the wall, his hands landing on either side of my head. He looked into my eyes. You think I did not notice, Tessa? I notice everything. Hearing my first name from him sent a strange shiver through my body. I asked why he said nothing. He replied that I was his employee. He valued my work and did not want to lose me. He thought he could control his feelings. His thumb brushed my lower lip, sending a jolt through me. But that man looked at you like you could be taken. I saw red. You are mine, Tessa. His words were a fierce, possessive claim. He said I had been his since my interview. He remembered my dress, my work ethic, and even my coffee orders. Tell me you feel this also. He pleaded that I not make him suffer alone. My mind told me to lie. This job was my lifeline. He was dangerous. But my heart confessed the truth I had hidden for 2 years. I feel it. The words hung in the air between us. Say it again, he commanded, his voice rough. I feel it. The admission came easier. A sound, half growl and half laugh, escaped him. He spoke of his own madness, of wanting to destroy his desk just to get to me. He fought for control, then stepped back. The loss of his heat was a physical shock. This complicates everything, he said, running a hand through his hair. My life is not a safe place for you. Reality returned like a cold wave. He was right. I needed this job to pay for my mother's medical care. He was Theo Valentini, a man whose world was filled with violence and secrets. I stood up straight. We should forget this happened. I will go back to my desk. His eyes were like a storm. I did not say I was letting you go. I said this complicates things. There is a difference. My heart leaped. For 2 years I practiced control. In 30 seconds, Vincent Caruso destroyed it by looking at what is mine. He stepped closer again, his presence magnetic. I do not share, Tessa. I do not lose. And I do not allow other men to want what belongs to me. I tried to sound strong. I do not belong to anyone. His smile was dark. Then why is your heart racing? Your body knows the truth. It knows you are mine. What do you want? I whispered. Everything. The word was final. But we will start with dinner tomorrow at 8 o'clock. It was a command. His thumb touched my cheek. You will call me Theo when we are alone. I tested the name on my tongue. This is not a good idea. He agreed. I am out of good ideas where you are concerned. Only bad ones are left. He returned to the table, his professional mask back in place, but I could see the heat beneath it. Go to your desk, Miss Morgan, and wear something nice tomorrow, but not too nice. I have very little self-control with you. I would like our first date to include dinner. He left me trembling but feeling more alive than ever. The workday ended in a blur. At 5:30, his man, Marco, placed a box on my desk. Inside was a new phone with a note. It said my number was programmed in. So was his. I should answer when he calls. That night, the phone rang at exactly 8:09. Hello? Theo's voice was deep over the line. Did you eat dinner? Yes, I made pasta. What kind? He asked. Why spaghetti aglio? The question was simple. I am learning about you, he said. I have wasted 2 years, Tessa. I am not wasting more. He asked about my mother. I told him everything. The sickness, the bills, the guilt. He just listened. He said she would be proud. You took a job with the most dangerous man in Chicago, he told me. That is either courage or desperation. Probably both. He was right. At work, his touch was a constant, brief fire on my skin. He found reasons to bring me close. His eyes followed me with a hunger that made work impossible. At 7 o'clock, he stood at my desk. He wore a dark suit that made his eyes look like silver. Ready? He asked. He dismissed my need to change. You look perfect. Our reservation is at 8:30. He already knew my address. Of course he did. In his car, his hand found mine. He laced our fingers together. It was a possessive act that should have been frightening. Instead, I felt safe. This terrifies me, Tessa, he said. You terrify me. You are the first thing I have ever wanted more than power. His words left me breathless. Then we arrived at my building. Theo's face grew hard as he saw the graffiti and broken door. Pack a bag, he ordered. You are not staying here another night. I panicked, telling him I could not afford another place. He cut me off. I am not asking you to pay. There is a secure unit in my building downtown. It is yours. You will, he said, holding my face. You are mine now, and I protect what is mine. So I packed a bag. The truth was, I was always afraid in that building. Refusing him felt wrong. The restaurant was exclusive. We sat in a private corner. Theo ordered in perfect Italian. My father insisted I learn, he said. A darkness passed over his eyes. He insisted on many things. He died when I was 22, Theo explained. He left me his entire world. You do not choose power. You either take it or it ruins you. I asked if he ever wished for a different life. Every day, he said. Then he asked about my dreams. I wanted to be a teacher, but my mother became ill. I dropped out of college and used my school money for her care. I left home with debt instead of a degree. His hand covered mine. You gave up your dreams for her, he said. That is everything. He watched me eat dessert with a burning intensity. I am memorizing you, he whispered. I told him I wanted to kiss him. He said he had wanted to kiss me for years, but he knew if he started, he would not be able to stop. The car ride back was torture. His hand rested on my leg, a silent claim. The apartment was on the 20th floor, with huge windows and city lights. He explained the security. Marco lived 15 floors below. His penthouse was 40 floors up. He gave me a key card with access to everything, including him. I take care of what is mine, Tessa, he said, cornering me in the kitchen. Tell me to leave. Tell me anything but what I want to hear. He wanted to hear that I wanted this as much as he did, that I was ready to stop fighting. I was tired of being careful, tired of a life that taught me anything good was a trap. So when he stood there, I told myself to be reasonable and send him away. But I was done being reasonable. "Kiss me," I whispered. He didn't hesitate. His mouth was demanding on mine, his hands holding my face exactly where he wanted it. It was too much. It was not enough. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathless. 2 years, he said. For 2 years I have wondered. I needed to leave, but he did not move. If I stay, he warned, I will not be able to stop. I looked at him. Maybe I do not want you to wait. His eyes went dark. Do not tempt me, Tessa. I am barely in control. He kissed me again, but this time it was soft. Then he created a space between us. Tomorrow, Marco will drive you. You are not taking the train again. He walked to the door and turned. Lock it behind me, Tessa. Use the alarm. I will know if you do not. After he was gone, my phone buzzed. A text from Theo. Sleep well. Tomorrow, I will show you what it means to be mine. I did not sleep. All I could feel was his mouth on mine. The new apartment he gave me was quiet. There were no sirens, no angry neighbors, none of the sounds that always made me check the locks twice. 20 floors above the city, I was in his world now. In the mirror, my lips were still swollen from his kiss. A small mark was on my neck. It was proof that last night was real. I chose a dress I had never been brave enough to wear before. Today was different. I did not want to be invisible. Marco was waiting in the lobby at exactly 7 in the morning. He drove a black Mercedes. Good morning, Miss Morgan. He met my eyes in the mirror. Mr. Valentini takes care of his people. You are his people now. That comes with certain privileges. The way he said it told me it also came with rules. When we arrived, the office felt the same, but I was different. I felt every sound while I waited for him. Theo walked in at 8:30, and the entire room changed. His eyes found me instantly. Miss Morgan, my office. The moment the door closed, he was on me, his hands on my face. He kissed me like he was starving. I missed you, he said against my lips. I reminded him we were at work. I do not care, he answered. His mouth moved to my neck. I have been professional for 2 years. I am done. His eyes scanned my dress. Are you trying to kill me, Tessa? I thought you would like it. He looked at me, his gaze full of heat. I want to take it off of you, but we have a problem. The Caruso family is coming. Vincent will be with his father. You will stay locked in this office until they are gone. When he looked at you yesterday, I almost lost control. If he says your name today, I will kill him. So you will stay here. The fact that he talked about murder so easily should have scared me. It did not. I felt a thrill at how protective he was. Okay, I whispered. He kissed me again, more gently this time. I will have lunch sent up for us. And tonight, I am taking you somewhere we can be alone. Now, work from my desk. Do not leave this room until I come for you. The morning passed slowly. I could hear angry voices from the conference room. The Italian was too fast for me to understand, but the tone was clear. Then I heard Theo's voice, cold and sharp, cutting through the noise. There was only silence after that. A moment later, my phone buzzed. Stay put. Everything is fine. He returned at 12:30, his anger barely contained. He locked the door. What happened? I asked. Vincent suggested my feelings for you were a problem for our business. He said I should share you to keep peace between our families. Ice filled my chest. They want nothing, Theo said, his voice hard. I made it clear that you are not negotiable. I told them any man who disrespects you will answer to me. I might have destroyed a multi-million-dollar deal. He finally turned to face me. But you are worth more than any deal. My entire life was built on control. Then you shattered it all. He held my face, his touch both urgent and gentle. The smart thing would be to send you away, to set you up for life somewhere safe. But I will not do that. His forehead met mine. I am selfish. Now that I have had a taste of you, I cannot go back. The idea of another man touching you makes me want to set the world on fire. I do not want to go. You should run from me, but I refused. I looked into his dark, dangerous eyes and did not move. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Something inside him seemed to break. He kissed me with a raw desperation. His hands tangled in my hair, pressing me against the desk as papers fluttered to the floor. Nothing else mattered. A sharp rap on the door broke the moment. "Boss," Marco called out, "the Bratva are here early." Theo rested his head on my shoulder, breathing hard. 5 minutes, he answered. The footsteps faded. Theo gently fixed my hair and my dress, his hands trembling. His eyes were still wild. "Tonight," he promised me. "Just us." He kissed me one last time, a soft, reverent touch. Then the mask was back. He was Theo Valentini again, cold and in control. "Stay here," he ordered. "I will send up lunch. An hour, tops." When he was gone, I sank into his chair, shaking. We were in his office. It was insane. And yet, I had wanted him to continue. A message from an unknown number buzzed on my phone. "You are playing with fire, Miss Morgan. Theo Valentini ruins everything he touches. You are next." Ice filled my veins. I sent the message to Theo. His reply was instant. "Do not answer. I am handling it." Lunch arrived at 1. It was expensive Italian food from a place I loved. Marco delivered it with a note. "I ordered your favorites. Eat. You need strength for tonight." Tea. He knew my favorites. He had been paying attention for 2 years, noting every order. I spent the rest of the day working, my nerves on edge. At 5:30, Theo appeared. "Ready?" he asked. "We are going home, my home." He held out his hand. "I have something to show you." His penthouse was the entire 40th floor. The elevator opened into a space that felt like a cold, modern museum with stunning views of Chicago. Everything was perfect, expensive, and empty. "This is where I sleep," he said, "not where I live." He led me to a library. This room was different. It felt warm and real. Books filled every wall. A leather chair sat by the window next to a half-finished drink. "This is my escape," Theo said softly, "when the world is too much." He picked up a worn book. "My mother gave me this. The Count of Monte Cristo. It is about a man who lost everything and fought his way back. She said revenge should be cold, but love should burn hot. I was 16 when she died of cancer. My father was never the same. He grew colder, saying grief was a weakness that gets you killed." Theo set the book down. I think he was just terrified to feel anything after her. I stepped closer to him. "Is that what you are afraid of? Feeling?" He looked at me. "I am afraid of what I feel with you. I am afraid of losing control. I am afraid I will hurt you. You deserve a better life than this, Tessa. A better man. Maybe I do not want better. Maybe I only want you." He kissed me, slow and deep. "I have to tell you how this all began." We sat together in the armchair, his arm around me. For the first time, the feared Theo Valentini let his armor down. My father was old-school Mafia. He raised me to take over. When I was 22, a rival family had him killed. They thought we would fall apart without him. His jaw clenched. They were wrong. I took control. I hunted down every person involved and made brutal, public examples of them. No one challenged me after that. "You were just a kid." I was full of rage. Grief can change a man. I told myself it was about honor and family. But the truth is, I enjoyed the power. I became the man my father wanted. A monster who could command an empire. You are not a monster, am I not? I have ordered men to their deaths, Tessa. The details would make you run. But you also run legitimate companies. You fund scholarships and hospitals. I have seen the records. That is just guilt, he said. An attempt to balance an unbalanced scale. I faced him. Why tell me this now? Are you trying to push me away? I am telling you so you know the choice you are making. Because after this, there is no turning back. You will belong to my world. What if I already do? I touched his jaw. What if I crossed that line years ago? His eyes grew dark. Then may God have mercy on us both. He kissed me with a fierce hunger, yet his hands were gentle. He stood, lifting me into his arms, and carried me to his bedroom. The room was simple, dominated by a large bed and the city lights beyond the windows. He set me down. Last chance, he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. Tell me to stop. Tell me anything but yes. Yes, I breathed. Yes to what? Say it. Yes to you. To us. To all of it. A possessive fire lit his eyes. You are mine now. Do you understand? Mine to protect. He traced my lip with his thumb. Mine to claim. Then claim me. And in that moment, the dangerous world outside disappeared. Later, wrapped in his arms, he whispered into my hair. I will not let anything hurt you. You are under my protection now. Theo. Yes, Tessa. I think I am falling in love with you. He grew completely still. Then he tilted my head up, his gaze intense. I fell in love with you the day you stayed late without being asked. The day you made my coffee perfectly without instruction. The day you looked at me like a man, not a monster. He kissed me gently. I have been yours for 2 years, Tessa. I am just glad you are finally mine. The morning sun filled the room. I woke up slowly, feeling the silk sheets and the warm weight of his arm around me. The memories of last night returned. The way he had touched me, the beautiful Italian words he had whispered against my skin, the way he held me as if I were precious. You are thinking too loud, he murmured. His hand gently cupped my face. I am done hiding how I feel about you. He spoke with quiet intensity. By the end of today, everyone will know you are mine. Everyone will know you are under my protection. But will that not make me a target? His expression darkened. It makes you untouchable. Anyone who even thinks of hurting you will face me. We just need to set up some rules. There would be no more pretending. I was his. He told me I would have security. The words were not a request. His voice was made of steel. Being connected to him was a risk he would not let me take alone. I wanted to fight him on it. I wanted my old life back. But I knew his world was filled with violence. His enemies saw me as a weakness, a way to hurt him. Fine, I finally said, but they need to be invisible. He smiled just a little. Marco's team is the best. You will not see them most of the time. But sometimes, your safety will be more important than secrecy. You have to trust me. His phone buzzed 3 times. He read the messages, and his face grew dark. The Caruso family was angry. Vincent's father wanted an apology. His jaw was tight. They are threatening our shipping deal. They plan to work with the Moretti family. I asked him what he would do. He said he would handle it. But first, he wanted to make me breakfast. He said he was discovering that he liked taking care of me. You know how to cook? I asked. My mother taught me, he said. A man who cannot feed himself is not a man. He got out of bed and pulled on black boxers. Stay here, he told me. I will bring it up. This was all happening so fast. Just yesterday, I was his secretary. Now I was in his bed, wearing his protection. My own phone buzzed. It was a message from Marco. Your security is assigned. Officer Chen will meet you at the office. Then a second text appeared from a number I did not know. The message was cold. Enjoy it while it lasts. Theo gets tired of his toys. My blood turned to ice. I deleted the text, but my hands would not stop shaking. Who was this? How did they get my number? Theo came back 20 minutes later with a tray of food. There were eggs, bacon, fruit, and coffee. He had put on sweatpants that hung low on his hips. I saw a long, jagged scar on his ribs. It was from a knife. I touched it and asked what happened. "It was 5 years ago," he said. "A disagreement. The other man used a blade to make his point." Theo's voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. He was wrong. "Did you hurt him?" I asked. "Yes. He came at me with a knife. I used a gun. I should have been afraid. I should have seen the violence in him. Instead, I traced the scar. It was proof that he could be hurt, that he had survived." "You are not afraid of me," he said with wonder in his voice. "Should I be?" "Most women are." "I am not most women," I told him. "I think you have hurt people, Theo. But I do not think you would ever hurt me." "Never," he said. The word was a promise. "I would destroy the world to keep you safe." We ate breakfast. It felt so normal. He fed me strawberries and stole kisses. He made me laugh with stories about his nephew. I saw the man behind the monster. At 9:30, we got dressed for work. He watched me in my new black dress. "You look like you belong to me," he said. He pulled me close. "Tonight, we are having dinner with my sister," he said. "She wants to meet you." My heart started beating faster. "Your family? Already? Rosa wants me to bring someone to dinner. She will love you." The drive to the office was new. He kept his hand on my leg the whole way. He showed me the buildings he owned and the parts of the city he protected. He was showing me his kingdom. Marco was in the garage with a woman in her early 30s. "Miss Morgan, this is Officer Chen," Marco said. "She is former Secret Service. You can call her Amy. She will be your primary security." Amy shook my hand. "Most of the time," she said, "you will not even know I am here. But sometimes, there will be a threat. In those moments, you must do exactly what I say. Your safety is all that matters." Theo put his hand on my back. "Amy has my full authority," he said. "Her judgment is final, even over mine." I finally understood how serious this was. I was not just dating my boss. I was in a world that needed armed guards. A stranger was now in charge of keeping me alive. The elevator ride was crowded with Theo, Marco, Amy, and me. When the doors opened, the office was quiet. Everyone was staring and whispering. The news had traveled fast. Theo kept his hand on my back as we walked. Amy stood against a wall, watching. "Conference call in 30 minutes, Theo announced to the office. "Miss Morgan, I need you to take notes." It was an excuse, but it worked. I followed him into his office, feeling every eye on me. The moment the door shut, he held me. "Ignore them," he said. "Let them talk. They are idiots if they think you did not earn your job." His voice became hard. "If anyone says that to you, they will be fired." The conference call was about his restaurant business. He was charming and confident. There was no sign of the dangerous man beneath the suit. When it was over, Marco stood at the door. "The Caruso problem needs you now," he said. "Vincent's father is here with a lawyer." Theo's face turned to ice. "Put them in conference room 1. Get our lawyer on the phone." Then he looked at me. "Stay here," he said. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone but Marco or Amy. I need to know you are safe." I nodded, and he kissed me hard before he left. Amy came into the office. "I will stay with you," she said, "just in case." For the next hour, I could barely breathe. I heard yelling from the conference room. I heard glass break. Then I heard Theo's voice, low and deadly. My phone buzzed. It was the unknown number again. "He is going to get you killed. Get out now." I showed the text to Amy. She looked at it without emotion. "Do not respond to the messages. Mr. Valentini has enemies. They see you as a way to harm him. My only job is to keep you safe." Then I heard Theo's voice from the conference room. It was ice. "Tell Vincent if he comes near Tessa again, I will kill him myself. That is a promise." Soon after, Theo stood in the doorway. His knuckles were cut, but his eyes burned with victory. "It is handled," he said. "They wanted payment for disrespecting Vincent." He poured himself a drink. Powerful men tried to use me against him. They threatened to destroy his empire. But Theo's power became my shield. He told them I was untouchable. Any attempt to harm me would be met with brutal force. Fear should have been my first reaction. Instead, I felt an incredible sense of safety. He was a violent storm, and I was standing in its calm, quiet eye. "Come here," he said softly. He pulled me into his arms, and I felt his heart pounding against my own. He warned me that by claiming me, he had painted a target on my back. When he asked if I would leave, I told him I was staying. His kiss was a promise that could not be broken. Then the door flew open. It was Marco. "Boss, we have a situation. The Bratva attacked one of our warehouses. 3 men are down." Theo changed instantly. The tender man disappeared, replaced by a cold commander. "Lock down everything," he ordered. He turned to me, his eyes like steel. "This is your last chance to walk away. I could return to my old life, paying bills and feeling invisible. Or I could stay here, with a man who looked at me like I was worth starting a war for." "I am all in," I said. A fierce smile crossed his face. That night, the quiet dinner he had planned became a council of war. His dangerous world was now my own. There was no going back. I watched from a corner as he prepared to lead his men. The attack was not a random act of violence. Marco spread photos on the table. They had help from the inside. "Someone in my organization is a rat," Theo said, his voice pure ice. A younger man named Dante suggested the timing was no accident. He implied that our enemies saw my arrival as a new weakness they could exploit. The temperature in the room dropped. Theo's hand clenched into a fist. Then they are about to learn a very painful lesson. "This is what happens when someone mistakes love for weakness." Theo's voice cut through the silence in the room. "Tessa stays. She is under my protection, which means everyone here protects her. If you have an issue with that, you can leave." No one made a sound. "Good." He turned to Marco. "I want a full review of every person who had access to the warehouse schedule. Check their bank accounts. Look for sudden wealth." He continued. "And spread the word. $100,000 for the name of the person who sold us out." The guilt was eating at me. Were people dead because Theo cared about me? Was I making him weak? When the meeting was over, only Marco remained. Theo looked at me. "Do not." His voice was sharp. "Do not blame yourself for this. I know you. Your mind is already turning this into your fault." He knelt in front of me, his eyes level with mine. "The Bratva attacked because they smell weakness. This has been planned for months. You were just the excuse Dante needed to complain. But maybe he was right. Maybe I am distracted. I am focused." His hands held my face. "For the first time, I have something to protect beyond this family. That does not make me weaker, it makes me more dangerous." Marco cleared his throat. "Boss, we have to get you both out of here. The building is not secure." "Where to?" "The estate," Theo said. "Full security. I already made the call." He looked at me. "Get a bag from your apartment. We are staying there until this is done." "How long?" "As long as it takes." The ride was silent and heavy. Amy sat in the front seat, her hand near her weapon. Marco was driving, his eyes never still. I was between Theo and another guard, feeling safe and caged at the same time. I asked him about the estate, just to break the tension. "It is where I was raised," he said, his thumb drawing circles on my hand. "North of the city, on Lake Michigan. My grandfather built it in the 1950s. 20 private acres. My sister Rosa lives there." "Is she okay with me coming?" "She has been demanding to meet you. She will be happy." He almost smiled. "My nephew Marco, who is 8, will probably ask if you play video games." The ordinary sound of family life felt like a different world. We only stopped at my apartment long enough for me to pack some clothes. Amy came inside with me, her presence a strange mix of comfort and threat. She searched every room. "Clear," she finally said. "But be quick. We should not be exposed." In the car, I watched the city lights disappear. It felt like my old life was vanishing with them. "What are you thinking?" Theo asked. "3 days ago, my biggest problem was rent. Now I am running from the Russian mob with the head of the Italian Mafia." He was quiet for a second. "Boyfriend is not the right word. What are we?" "You are mine. And I am yours. That is all that matters." The estate appeared out of the darkness. A long, tree-lined driveway opened to a stone mansion that looked like it belonged in Italy. Lights were on in every window. Guards walked the grounds. This was a fortress. A woman stood on the steps. She was small, with dark hair and the same strong face as Theo. Finally, she called out, "I thought you changed your mind, Theo." "Rosa." His voice was warmer than I had ever heard it. He got out and hugged her. "Where is the little monster?" "Passed out from too much sugar," she said. She then looked at me. "You must be Tessa, the woman who made my brother act like a person again." I liked her right away. "Come inside," she said, taking my arm. "Theo, go do your violent planning. I am stealing your girlfriend." "She is not my girlfriend," he called out. Rosa laughed. "Men are so dramatic." She led me through the huge house. "He has been a nightmare for 2 years," she told me. "Always angry, always distracted." I told him he needed romance, but I guess he needed to fall in love. "I have never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you. Like you are the only real thing in his world." She showed me to a guest suite. "The bathroom is through there. My house is just past the garden if you need an escape." "Thank you, Rosa." She touched my arm. "No, thank you. For making him happy." The suite was 3 times the size of my apartment. It had a huge bed and a view of the lake. The closet was filled with new clothes in my size. It was clearly Theo's doing. I was looking at a dress when he came in. His jacket was off and he looked exhausted. "Rosa did not scare you away," he said. "She is wonderful." He moved closer. "You look at me like I deserve to be loved." He pulled me into a hug. "2 of my men died today, Tessa. Good men. It is my fault for not being prepared. You cannot control everything. In my world, if you lose control, people die." That is what Dante meant. Not that you are a distraction. It means I am responsible for their safety. And today, I failed. I touched his face. "What now?" "Now," he said, "I find who did this. I make them an example. And I make sure this organization can never be broken again." His eyes grew hard. "And I will protect you, no matter the cost." "What if that means letting me go?" "Never an option." His hands tightened on my waist. "I would fight the entire city before I would lose you." A knock on the door interrupted us. It was Marco. "Boss, we have a lead." It was a warehouse guard, a man named Tommy Ricci. He is a distant cousin of Marco's. "He is gone, but we found a payment from the Bratva." He turned back to me, his face a mask of pain. "This is the part of my life you cannot see, the part with impossible choices. What will you do? Marco is my best friend, but his family betrayed us, and 2 men are dead because of it. Our tradition says Marco has to be the one to handle it. He has to be the one to eliminate the threat his family caused. But you do not want him to do it." "I do not want any of this," he said, his voice raw. "I do not want to ask my friend to kill his own cousin. But this is my world. If I look weak now, our enemies will see an opening." He kissed me gently. "Stay here. Lock the door. I have to go be the monster they expect." While Theo planned for battle, I felt like a prisoner in a fortress. An unknown number appeared on my phone. The message was a clear warning. "He will never be able to protect you. Leave him now." My hands began to shake. My guard, Amy, noticed my distress. She examined the phone. "This is not a random threat," she said. "Whoever sent this has skills and resources. They are professionals. We need to get you a new, secure phone immediately." Amy confirmed what I already knew. Being close to Theo Valentini meant I would always be in some degree of danger. Later that evening, his sister Rosa brought food to my room. She saw my anxiety. My brother has been part of this life since he was a child, she explained. He knows all the costs and all the risks, and he is choosing you anyway. She looked at me directly. That should tell you everything you need to know. I told her people were dying because of me. That is not your fault, she said. That is the fault of men who choose violence. She told me about her own husband, Antonio, an outsider who chose to stay with her. Our love is real, not safe, she said. But every single day with him is worth the risk. When she left, I felt sure of my choice once more. She reminded me that love is not supposed to be safe, it is supposed to be real. Theo returned close to 2 in the morning, looking exhausted. It is handled, he said. The traitor was dealt with. Our connection to the Bratva has been severed. I could see fresh bruises on his skin. The interrogation became physical, he admitted, but he refused to give me the ugly details. He wanted to keep that part of his world away from me. I held him close. I am proud of you, I whispered. Proud that you try to shield me from the darkness. His arms tightened around me. I love you, he said, his voice raw. I have loved you for 2 years. I told him that I loved him too. In that moment, we found a fragile peace. The following 3 days were a strange mix of calm and crisis. His sister Rosa taught me the rules for this new world. Never ask direct questions about the business, she warned. If Theo wants you to know, he will tell you himself. He protects you with his silence. She called it a recipe for survival. The less you knew, the less could be forced from you. She said it so simply, as if torture was a normal risk of the job. Of course, she added that no one would dare harm me now that Theo had publicly claimed me. I was learning the brutal vocabulary of this world. Words were codes to hide the violence. Handled meant eliminated. A conversation meant a painful interrogation. On the 5th morning, Theo found me outside by the lake. The early light turned the frosted grass to silver. He put a blanket on my shoulders and pulled me close. He told me the problem was contained. Marco had found the Bratva crew from the warehouse. We sent them a clear message, he said. They now understand what happens when they come after what is mine. For now, they are standing down. His embrace grew tighter. We can return to the city if you are ready. We can try for a normal life. The words felt strange. I asked him if normal was even possible anymore. He admitted he did not know, but he wanted to try. He turned to face me, his gray eyes serious. I want to take you out to eat where guards are not watching every door. I want to wake up with you without thinking of defense plans. I want to give you a life you deserve. I told him the life I deserve is one that includes him. He smiled, saying that made him the luckiest man alive. We went back to Chicago that afternoon. The penthouse felt different. It was not just his space anymore. It was our space. He had made room for my clothes and my things in the bathroom. He had even bought food that he knew I liked. That evening he spoke while we made dinner. He said he called my mother's hospital and talked to her medical team about her treatment. I almost dropped my knife. He kept his focus on the food he was cutting. He said they mentioned a new experimental treatment. It was showing great promise, but insurance did not cover it. So I had her enrolled in the trial. All the costs are covered. I could not find the words to speak. I told him it was far too much. He said it was nothing. He finally met my eyes. Your mother is sick. You have carried that weight alone. But you are mine now, Tessa. Your burdens are my burdens. I went to him and wrapped my arms around his waist, pressing my face into his back. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for seeing me. That night, as we lay in bed, he traced lines on my skin. I need to ask you something. His serious tone made my heart race. What is it? He explained there was a gala next month. It was a charity event where all the major families gathered. That included both legitimate business owners and the people who worked in the shadows. This event was neutral ground, a place to project strength. Theo paused, looking at me. I need you there as my partner, not an assistant. I asked if it would be safe. He assured me Amy and his security would be there. Violence is forbidden at this gathering. The price for breaking that rule is too high. His finger traced my collarbone. But going public like this would be a clear statement. All of Chicago would know you belong to me, that I protect you. There would be no more guessing. He said he wanted to show me off, to make every man there understand that anyone who harmed me would answer to him. He then asked if I was prepared for that kind of attention. After this, I could never go back to being just his secretary. I would be his woman. I remembered the recent attack, the 2 men who died, and the constant threats. I thought of my mother, who was finally getting the care she needed because of him. I thought of our mornings together. I told him I was ready. His smile was possessive. He said Rosa would take me shopping for a dress that would make a statement. The following 3 weeks were a whirlwind. Rosa guided me through expensive boutiques, helping me find the perfect gown. We chose a stunning emerald dress that was both elegant and daring. Rosa was pleased. She said every man would want me and every woman would hate me. At the office, things had already changed. The whispers stopped. People treated me with a new level of respect. I was no longer an employee. I was his partner, and that had power. The anonymous threats kept coming, always with the same warning to leave him. Amy's investigation hit a wall. The sender used sophisticated methods to hide their identity. She thought the tone felt personal, not like a rival's scare tactic. She promised to keep digging, but warned me to stay alert. The night of the gala came. After hours of preparation, I felt transformed. When I walked into the living room, Theo was waiting in a tuxedo. His eyes darkened as he took me in. "You are the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," he breathed. He warned me he would have to keep other men away all night. I told him I only saw him. He explained that Amy and Marco would be with us, and I was to stay close. He gave me a signal, a touch to his ear. If he did that, I was to leave with Amy immediately, no hesitation. He saw my fear and said it was good because it keeps you alive. Then his voice softened. "I promise, Tessa, nothing will happen to you. I would die before I let anyone hurt you." The gala was in a magnificent ballroom, filled with Chicago's most powerful people. Beneath the glamour, the air was thick with tension. Bodyguards stood watch, and rivals exchanged loaded glances while maintaining a fragile peace. Theo kept his hand on my back, guiding me through the crowd. We exchanged greetings, playing the delicate game of power and respect. A man with silver hair approached us, Don Moretti. Theo's voice was flat as he greeted him and his cold-eyed son Lorenzo. The Don said he heard Theo was bringing a new companion. His eyes scanned me, and I held his gaze, showing no weakness. Theo's voice was like ice. "My fiancée, Tessa Morgan." My heart leaped at the word. It was a power move, a public declaration. Lorenzo stepped forward, a flicker of something in his eyes. He asked how a woman like me ended up with a man like Valentini, I countered, asking how anyone ends up anywhere. His face showed a hint of amusement. "She has fire," he told Theo. "Fire can be dangerous, or it can be intoxicating," Theo replied, pulling me closer before leading me to the dance floor. As we danced, I whispered the word fiancé. He admitted the proposal was unplanned, a reaction to the way Moretti looked at me. He looked down at me. "We can make it real, or it can be a convenient lie. It is your choice." I told him I wanted it to be real. His eyes burned with intensity. "Then say yes." I did. He kissed me there, in the middle of the ballroom, in front of everyone. It was an irreversible claim. Across the room, Rosa was beaming. The night became a haze of congratulations and veiled warnings. Theo never moved from my side. But as we were leaving, I saw a face in the crowd that made my blood run cold. It was Mark, my ex-boyfriend. He was staring right at me. Theo felt me tense beside him. "What is it?" I told him I thought I saw someone I knew, but that it was no one important. My mind was racing. What was Mark doing here? Could he be the one sending the messages? Later that night, safe in Theo's arms, I still felt a sense of impending doom. He asked what I was thinking. I told him I loved him, but I was scared. He promised our story would end with us together. I wanted so badly to believe him. Just then, my phone buzzed with a new message. I warned you, it's too late now. As I read the words, the penthouse alarm began to scream. The alarm screamed and Theo was already moving, grabbing a gun from the nightstand. He commanded me to stay and lock the door. He said not to open it for anyone but him or Amy. He kissed me hard. I love you, he said. Remember that. Then he was gone. I was alone with the noise and the horrible feeling that our borrowed time was over. I heard men shouting, then gunshots and breaking glass. My hands shook as I called Amy. Stay put, she said. We are handling it. It was a Bratva hit team. Then the line went dead. I stood frozen in his shirt, clutching my phone. Every instinct told me to run, but I had to trust him. The sounds of the fight faded into silence. The door handle turned. I backed away, looking for something to use as a weapon. Then I heard his voice, rough with exhaustion. Tessa, it is me. I opened the door with trembling hands. He was alive but disheveled, with a bleeding cut over his eye. It is over, he said. You are safe. I threw myself into his arms, and he held me tight. He carried me to the bed and explained they had tried to break into the penthouse. They failed. He promised it would not happen again, that he was making the place impenetrable. I know why this happened, I said. It is because you claimed me. The Bratva saw me as a way to hurt you. His hand cupped my face. They were wrong, he said. They did not hurt you. They just made me angry. And tomorrow, they will learn exactly what that means. The fury in his voice should have scared me, but I felt protected. I saw my ex-boyfriend Mark tonight, I told him. Theo went completely still. He asked me to tell him everything about Mark. I explained our history and the debt Mark had left me with. When I finished, Theo called for his advisor, Marco. He ordered a full background check on Mark Harris. He wanted to know where Mark had been and why he was at the gala. Pull his phone records, Theo commanded. You think he is the one who sent the threats? I said. He shook his head. I think it is too much of a coincidence. We will find out. We stayed awake all night as his security team worked. By morning, the building was secure. Marco came back with early information. Mark Harris worked as a consultant for firms with known Bratva connections. Bring him in, Theo ordered. I told him he could not just kidnap the man. I am not going to kidnap him, Theo said, his eyes cold. I am going to invite him to a meeting. 2 days later, I watched through one-way glass as Mark was led into a conference room. He looked nervous. When Theo entered the room, Mark's face went pale. Mr. Harris, thank you for accepting my invitation. Mark's voice was shaky. Did I have a choice? Everyone has choices, Theo replied pleasantly. And you have made several interesting ones lately. Theo slid a folder across the table. It was filled with phone records and surveillance photos of Mark watching my building. Would you like me to continue? Mark's confidence shattered. I was trying to protect her, he claimed. I heard terrible things about you. I thought if she was scared enough, she would leave you before you got her killed. I loved her once. Through the glass, I felt a strange pang of understanding for his twisted logic. Theo leaned back. Here is what is going to happen, he said. You will stop contacting Tessa. You will leave Chicago. And you will pray I never have a reason to think about you again. If you show up in her life again, Theo said calmly, I will make you wish you had never been born. The quiet threat was terrifyingly real. He told Mark a plane ticket to San Francisco and a job interview were waiting for him. Start over, Theo said, and forget Tessa Morgan exists. After Mark was gone, Theo came to me. He said Mark was telling the truth, in his own misguided way. With that threat gone, our life began to feel almost normal. We fell into a comfortable rhythm. 1 month later, on the terrace of the estate, he officially proposed. My mother's cancer treatment was working, and she was getting better. She had met Theo over a video call and gave us her blessing with tears in her eyes. "He loves you," she said. "I can see it." 6 months after the attack, I stood in a wedding dress, feeling like a dream. Rosa, Theo's sister, stood with me. "Ready?" she asked. I told her I was terrified. "Good," she said, squeezing my hand. "But you have given my brother hope, something to live for beyond the violence." The ceremony was small, with just family and Theo's closest people. We were married on the estate grounds, overlooking the lake. When Theo saw me walking toward him, his eyes filled with wonder. "You came," he said softly. I told him I saw exactly who he was, and I was choosing him. I was choosing us. After we were pronounced husband and wife, Theo handed me an envelope. He told me to open it later when we were alone. That night, I did. Inside was the deed to a building in downtown Chicago. A note in Theo's handwriting came with it. "This is yours," it said. "Do what you want with it. Because while you may be mine, I never want you to forget you are your own person. I love you because you challenge me to be a better man." I found him on the terrace. I said the gift was too much. "It is not enough," he replied, pulling me against him. "But it is a start." We stood there together, husband and wife. The future was uncertain, and his world would always have danger. But we were facing it together, bound by love and the promise to protect each other. "Do you have any regrets?" Theo asked me. I thought about everything that brought us to this moment. The years I spent loving him in silence, the danger, the difficult choices. "I have only one regret," I said, "that I wasted 2 years being invisible when I could have been with you." His smile was fierce and full of love. "Then let us make up for lost time, Mrs. Valentini." And we did for the rest of our lives. If this story made your heart race, gave you chills, or reminded you that you deserve to be someone's everything, smash that like button right now. Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed with Theo, or would you have walked away while you still could? Share this with the one person you know who needs to hear this tonight. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on notifications, because the next story might be even more intense than this one. This content was carefully researched, developed, and manually edited by our team to deliver meaningful stories and valuable life lessons. Thank you for listening.